All right, another episode of Brewing Bytes, Tech Tales and Safety Fails. Today, we're going to talk about the executive order that was redacted by President Trump, and he instated another one, but not specifically about the actual order. I think I want to understand more about how the pace of AI and the sort of acceleration and innovation affects us, not just from, a day-to-day usage standpoint, but I actually want to specifically explore the ethics and safety side of this, where some of the strengths and weaknesses might be in this executive order, what it could mean for us in terms of going forward, whether these models are going to be there, but also from a national sort of economy and sort of what people are dubbing as an AI war, right? So why don't we start with the policy side of this? So I did a little bit of digging, Sandy, and from what I read, basically all of the ethics, safety, and AI development that was put in place, part of the executive order by President Biden, was reversed by President Trump in this new one. And a large part of why they were doing this is because they really want to be number one when it comes to artificial intelligence and the capabilities that it has to offer, not just for the country, but from a growth and economy stability and just generally innovation perspective. I'm not so sure I'm fully aligned to it, but I kind of see where they're coming from. It's sort of that short term versus long term thinking here around developing AI capabilities. What are your thoughts? What have you found out so far?
I mean, I just want to point out that this is kind of being framed as political rhetoric. It's kind of like Biden's order constrained innovation because it was implementing some kinds of regulations and testing and things like that. And that, the Trump administration is all about freedom and innovation and just like full steam ahead and, really kind of pushing the boundaries as far as like, let's release all regulations and let companies just go crazy with innovation. And I want to like reframe that for a second
Yeah.
because that is a political position. That is a narrative that is being put out there just to get support, get people hyped up, get people. And the reality is that innovation actually occurs within the boundaries of constraint. So when you actually have constraints or guardrails put up, that's when companies are forced to innovate. They're forced to kind of figure out how to
The
make
box.
these products that can actually meet the parameters of the user, of the population as a whole, right? And so it's not really a constraint on innovation to be able to put those guardrails up and those regulations up. And there, research has shown that historically. But so it's really just a political narrative about that. And it's kind of like, let's get rid of all these guardrails so that, let's allow the negative externalities, let's allow the, destruction of our environment, let's allow the biases in AI, let's just kind of let go of all of those necessary um, things to make like technological advancement kind of responsible and ethical. And that way, people can just profit and not have to feel like oh, poor me, I'm in a box, right? Like, I don't know. It's all just rhetoric, in my opinion. Right.
I just imagine Mark Zuckerberg saying that. But I'm in a box, I'm in a box. But he's the one that's creating Llama, which is supposedly open source capability. I was listening to an interview recently from the Davos sort of event that's occurring. Scale AI CEO was talking about, the fact that China is on par, which I actually did check out the model recently that everybody's talking about. It was released on Christmas Day, I think. It's called DeepSeek AI. And for us right now, there's two, obviously, the top two models are Claude, which is from Anthropic, and then there's the O1 model, which is from OpenAI. And apparently the claim is, and I can't validate the claim just yet, which is something I'm going to definitely be digging into. But the claim is that DeepSeek AI did what OpenAI can do with far less resources, right? And to your point, they did this by, the China team is claiming we did it with one hand behind our back, largely because they have so many constraints. They're using a lot of the same type of NVIDIA chips. They're using a lot of the products that are being created by American companies to do this work. And it's just interesting to me to understand, yes, there's this need for the speed of innovation in AI. We're already accelerating at a breakneck speed, in my opinion. Um, but we can't forget the safety aspect of this, right? The ethics and safety is very, very important. And I think so. Scale AI, for instance, has something they call the SEAL part, which is safety evaluations and acceleration lab, I think is what they call it. So it's like a SEAL lab that they have. And they focus a lot on not just the computational side of things for the AI model, but they also look at, somewhat of the ethical side and the use of AI and things of that nature. So, you know, could there be a middle ground, is the way I'm thinking about this. Yes, there is rhetoric. There's always political rhetoric every time there's a presidential change occurring. And in this case, it might be more than we want. But I think that there's that middle ground that we need to find at this point. So, from what I understand, he wants to remove the government's role in regulating AI, right? In this executive order that he's put together, which maybe because I don't know that the government's necessarily intellectually equipped to be regulating AI, in my opinion. I'm not saying that people in the government aren't smart, but the technology in itself is just growing at a pace that we can't even keep up as technologists, right? Um, so I'm just trying to figure out what is that sort of set of things that could and should be taken into consideration as this executive order is executed. And I really think that at least at a minimum, we should be asking every single AI company to have some kind of an ethics and safety board of sorts, as well as complete transparency from that ethics and safety board so that the public knows, sort of what they're doing and how they're doing it. It's at least a minimum that we could do around it. It just feels
I
kind of
mean, that's,
haphazard, you know?
when you're looking at the long-termist standpoint, which is we want to make sure that AI is aligned with human values so that it doesn't come back and Terminator us. Like, and maybe the short term also. I mean, one of the big ones is the evaluations. I don't personally think that the government really has any illusions that it can handle the evaluator role, the audit role,
Yeah.
uh, with internal staff. That would probably be outsourced to third parties. Um, but the idea of we should understand how AI is working. We should understand that in a transparent manner, how it's getting from point A to point B. What is that rationale? What is the justification for the decisions it's making? And we just don't really have that right now.
Yeah. I
Like
mean, the
we're not
government
able to
is
assess
lacking on
that.
so many levels. Yeah, and that's the thing is like, we're a nonprofit. Our governance is very strict in terms of how we do things, why we make certain decisions. And I think that that needs to translate into the private sector, specifically in the AI piece of this, is right. The governance, the well-being of human beings is important as part of this equation. We don't need an AGI that can try to delete itself, which is what some of these models tried to do, right? Like they not delete itself, but replicate itself. Sorry, I said the wrong
Hmm.
word. Because the when OpenAI's model was trying to be removed from the servers, it copied itself to another server. And this is just early
And
stages still, right?
to
So
replicate
it's,
itself, and
definitely,
it can also deceive humans. Anthropic has also discovered through their research that it can deceive um humans in like its actions when you compare it from one. You have the two, if you're like comparing the models side by side and you're saying one has the parameters
yeah,
that whatever decision it makes is going to feed back into giving the operators the ability to change the model to constrain it in some way versus the testing will be, there's not testing, it's just operating. And
yeah,
then the AI models actually will perform differently to in the ones where it thinks it's going to be corrected or punished for doing things a certain way. It'll perform in the way that it thinks the operator is going to be um, responding to it. And so that
yeah,
is kind of like playing nice, right?
yeah,
And in the other one, when it's not constrained, it's just reaching its goal however it wants to reach its goal and performing in the preferred method.
yeah,
And, I there's a huge this is probably a different podcast, but there's a huge debate between the long-termists and the short-termists with AI ethics and development in the future. It's
yeah.
basically do we constrain and regulate AI now so that it doesn't like create an existential risk for us in the future? Or do we focus specifically on the harms that it has today, like the biases, um, the jobs that people are going to lose, like all of the kind of short-term risks that we're seeing today with AI? And it's, in my opinion, it's super unfortunate that these two camps seem to kind of butt heads and they're
Yeah.
competing for kind of resources and funding to do their work, and and they're not aligned in their goals as far as like what should we work on right now with AI policy and things like that. um, I personally think that both are important, both looking at kind of short-term AI development, whether it's biased, whether it's ethical today, but also with that understanding that if it's recursively self-improving, if it's able to deceive humans, if it's able to um, get its own resources, obtain
Yeah.
its own resources, then we're going to
I
have AGI, right? It's going to be able to
I
jump
mean, we're
out of.
getting close. I mean, OpenAI just came out with the video of their launch, right? Where the AI was able to control everything on the computer, do the clicks, do all of those things. We have the reCAPTCHA capability to check and see if it's a bot. Now we don't really have the ability to check if it's a bot. That's a level of risk we're introducing to cybersecurity. There's so many other constraints that we need to be thinking about. I was joking with a friend earlier. I was like, what we need is we need to be teaching AI like it's a child. What's good from right from wrong type of situation here. Because I do think, a lot of how it's programmed, what you put into the code. I mean, we use AI for our products, right? Like we use it for Ruth. And when we created it, we trained it to become sort of the understand the differences between the right and wrong, right? In terms of how it's responding, what it's saying, how it could affect somebody. And I think building in that emotional intelligence, right, can be a double-edged sword as well, right? Which is now, do we have somebody building this in, it saying this is the right thing to do? Don't do these other things because it could be really harmful. And then later it could just turn to the harmful side. Like, how do you control these things? There's no way to really control it, right? It's a question of our millennia. I would think that we're going to have to figure out a way to work within the constraints of this long term, but near term, there's going to be a lot of job losses. But I think there's an opportunity, like you said, with the two camps to really come together and say, listen, there are things immediately we need to solve for, which is job losses. How do we ensure that people are either reskilled, that we're able to find ways for them to make a living so that they're not going to be in this situation where, they're constantly in poverty or having to deal with money and resource issues, right? The second thing I think long term that we do need to ensure that we do is having some method to integrate in the ethical aspects of a human into an AI. And it sounds ridiculous. And I mean, I don't even know how we would go about doing it. It's something probably, again, for a different episode. But I do think that there's that adaptation that has to be made into an AI. Um, but, maybe we talk to an AI and see what the AI thinks. I don't know. But there's amount of
Uh,
data that we have out on the internet that it's consumed. There's so much violent information because most of our media, that's largely what it is. There's not a whole lot of good out there. There's people that talk about all the negativity and the negative things that happen, and there's wars and all this information that it's been fed, right? How do we feed it information that has also that's sort of the good side of it, right? Maybe that actually does help it to better understand how its behavior reflects as a consequence. Who knows?
I mean, they're trying, the idea is creating these AIs are supposed to replicate like neural networks, like your brain, right? That's
Yeah.
kind of how they started with this AI development to begin with. It's like, how do we create this to be like a human brain?
Yeah.
But it's all kind of logic based,
Yeah.
right? And so then you're assuming, I think falsely assuming that humans behave logically, and we don't, right? So if you give an AI a task, you're saying, this is your goal, reach this goal, go from point A to point B, okay? But maybe getting to that goal means that somebody's going to get harmed in the process, right? And so then there's these other competing goals and like layers of goals, right? Like constraints, parameters.
Yeah.
Um, and you're saying like teach them kind of what's right and wrong and things like that. And I'm not sure that that's um, I guess I'm curious to see how that would translate into a logical structure, right? Like, because that's not a logical process for human beings. There's socialized processes. You're making decisions based on preferences that are different for different people, that are dynamic, that are related to how you're adapting in society, how you're fitting in with society. You're constraining yourself in ways that you don't like to constrain yourself. You're not getting what you want, but you're doing it for other reasons. You're doing it because you don't want to go to jail, or you're doing it because this is the way that you can have like a decent, social bonding or whatever experience, right? Those are goals that the AI is not going to care about, right? There's no AI jail. There's no like, I'll be your AI friend if you act nicely towards people, like,
I
um,
think that's also like the prejudices and the biases that we humans have will get coded in, right, in some form or fashion. But, to your point, we're very emotional beings. We're not very, very, how do you say, logical beings most of the time. We react with such weird expectations of situations, of people, and so many other things. Um, but I think, like I'll share a little bit about how we did this, right? For Ruth, right? Where we built out um scenarios for Ruth to learn, right? And these scenarios were what we prompted into the system to say, these are the scenarios that can occur. Here are the things you need to keep in mind about what the user might be going through. Here are some ways that you should be responding to it. But again, that's a very situational built-in capability, right? But when we talk about AGI, this is a basically a self-thinking, self-operating artificial intelligence. Although I would argue most of the time humans are artificial intelligence too, but that's just I think the lack of some common sense there. But um, I do think that the public and private collaboration does need to happen here, right? Where we develop these AI technologies, but do it in a way that's responsible. And having a third party evaluation, or even just, not necessarily hindering the innovation, but at least focusing on the fact that there's consequences to what we're doing with this product, right? And what are those consequences, and how do we ensure either safeguards or potential opportunities for elevating people's ability to have a better livelihood? I don't know if they're actually going to push that as part of this new executive order, right?
Yes,
Um,
they are actually. Apparently, there is a Stargate project, which is a $500 billion investment in AI infrastructure in collaboration with OpenAI, Oracle, and SoftBank, supposedly to create over 100,000 jobs. Again, rhetoric, right? Because they also want to cut jobs.
yeah. I
But
mean,
um, but this is the double-edged sword, right? We have government by the people for the
for the
people.
people,
Okay.
yes.
So it's supposed to be that in the public is involved in monitoring and able to have opinion and discourse and advocacy and all the things with regards to the way that government operates and government runs, right? If you're just coming right into office and saying this is our partnership with these five companies, it goes against like all the procurement rules for government.
Free
And so
market. It goes against the free market.
it goes
Like,
against free market. You're basically setting the monopoly, or you're not giving anybody a chance to compete. Like, why isn't Anthropic on that list, right?
yeah,
So and is there a public discussion? Is there a public opinion that can be other than just on social media, right? So government has a process. They make a bid, they put it out there, they give you time, they give the public time to make comments on it, to talk to your representatives, to let your representatives understand what the constituents want so that they can have an informed vote on these different issues and all of that stuff, right? That is supposed to be able to give us, the people, a chance to have input into the process. Not this government is not just like a green light to be able to like pick and choose, all the best kind of like top companies that we want to, you have like King Midas on top, right? And at the expense of others, at the expense of small businesses, at the expense of the other competition out there. And that process, that where we're at right now with this kind of tension that we're seeing right now, is that process, the democratic process, is slow.
very.
It's slow, right? And so people are like, this is slow, this is cumbersome, there's regulations. If you're running a private company, your job is to create a product that fits a market, a niche market, right? Like whatever your target audience is, that's who you're creating the product for. If you're and so you're able to kind of like build just for that market. If you are government, if you are public sector, your market is everyone.
Yeah.
Okay. So that means that the services you're delivering, the products that you're going out there have to serve all the public, Democrat, Republican, poor, rich, black, white, whatever. Like
Yeah.
everybody has to be included in this market. And so that's why we have a democratic system so that we can all be a part of this discussion and all of that. And so the problem is that that's slow. Democracy is slow and messy. And so are we at this tipping point now where we are like, we need to compete with AI on the AI front? We need to get AGI first before China does. We need to make sure that we are staying top of the heap for innovation. Otherwise, it could be a devastating result for us,
Mhm.
um, like national security on down, and so do we want to sacrifice democratic processes and ideals and systems so that we can just kind of make government a private sector industry, right? And all of our tax money is going towards this.
Yeah.
So do we want to just basically we're giving donations to the private sector in a sense, right? Like And so I think this is a huge dilemma that's splitting our country right now. You know,
I mean, I think, on the one hand, I see the earlier order as being, um, Biden's order being more about developing this AI ethical in a respectful way, like be kind and be good. And then I have, the Trump view of this is, can it win us a war? Can it make us money? And great. Ethics, methics, we don't need them, right? So I think that there is this ridiculous idea of ethics hold us back. And I don't agree with that at all. And I think even in due process, which is really what government is intended to provide to us, yes, if it's inefficient, figure out the inefficiencies, remove those, right? Come up with a more streamlined process to do this. Don't just get rid of it. Like if we're getting rid of it, it's going to be the wild, wild west of all of this stuff that's coming through. And I'm actually genuinely worried. And I teeter more as a centrist when it comes to politics, right? But if we look at the next generation of artificial intelligence that's coming in, it's gonna start having dual use. It's going to be used as a civilian and in the military sectors. And people need to understand
already
that.
is.
And if this moves, and it is already moving in the actual military sector, which is we would have surveillance, we would have cyber espionage, we'd have
We
continued
already have all this.
autonomous warfare. Yes, and it's mind-blowing that we're not even considering that. And on top of that, the cyber warfare aspect of this, which is like advanced phishing for information that's coming in. I mean, the whole reason we talked about the TikTok ban last time, right? If we have restrictions that we're putting on applications that are built by other countries that are taking data from our country, you're now talking about, so many complex issues that we don't even know how to deal with right now, right? So with the centralized governance model that China has, it allows the fast tracking of AI development within that country without the regulatory hurdles that are here in the US. So is that why we moved to this? Is this really the policy China has? I don't think so. So I really think that there is an aspect of national security that they're taking into consideration, which I understand. We do need to accelerate. We need to be able to defend our country if there is a cyber warfare, if there is something more serious happening from an AI front, which it will, right? That is sort of already on par with the trajectory we're on. But at the same time, we can't forget our own ethics. I mean, even soldiers have ethics when they're in the field and in the war, on the front lines, they make certain decisions, and these are things that an AI won't be able to do, you know? And it's
I
scary. The
I'm
thought
even
of it
gonna
is
make
very
it
scary.
I'm gonna even make it deeper than that because I think a lot of people argue, oh, ethics and all of that stuff, and because it's the right thing to do, and I don't even think that that's even a great argument. Like I think that's yeah, sure. If you feel like you're on the moral high ground, then that feels like a good argument, right? But the reality is that if you're just like barreling ahead with what we're doing, okay, this is AI and is advancing faster than I even imagined that it would. And I think
Yeah.
it's advancing faster than even a lot of like technologists that are in the field expected, right?
Yeah.
So what's happening right now is that creates incredible fear for people, whether they're aware of the fear and the anxiety or not.
Yeah.
So there is absolutely a societal implication, a societal consequence of all of this rapid technological growth, expansion, unknown, uncertainty, anxiety, and all of that stuff. And what happens is that bubbles up, right? And so you're already seeing that. You're already seeing the polarization and all of that happening. You're already seeing more violence. You're already seeing, you know, and I think that if policymakers think that if they just release all the guardrails and let this innovation, let this advancement happen at warp speed as fast as it can go, if they think that society is just going to stay the same, that people are just going to stay the same and adapt.
Yeah.
They're wrong because you're going to get backlash, you're going to get rebellion, you're going to get social strife, you're going to get people that are very desperate out there. The increasing wealth gap is just going to get worse, right? People are going to be so those societal impacts are going to come back and bite us in the ass.
I
So
mean, yes, 100%, 100%, right. I think it's, I don't know, this situation with development of AI, especially on the national security front, for the United States and China seems very, very eerily familiar to the Cold War, right? Where we were going about against Russia, we were trying to build, the nuclear weapons that we needed to, and there was a race, for these countries to get ahead and build these things. Well, guess what? Sounds very similar.
and we were
Um,
scapegoating certain types of people, and we were sending community groups to spy on the on citizens and turn them in for, imagined or real like political ideologies that were unwelcome and things like that, and it was a very scary time for people, and people were
yeah.
harmed.
I think when it's, there's two challenges that I see. There's a lack of oversight that would increase the chance of AI tools, being developed with adequate safeguards. Without adequate safeguards, my mistake. And I think that adequate safeguards are critical when we have, children that are accessing AI. We have elderly that potentially are accessing AI. They may not be familiar with anybody that's not a technologist and not familiar with this tool. And the powerful nature of this tool could be very harmful to them, right? Which could backfire because this is all misused by adversaries very quickly. Like they pick this stuff up and they just go with it, right? There's a lot of scams happening. There's a lot of CSAM all over the web. There's so much stuff happening. I think that there's like a flip side of this. So we move from the individual to the nation, right? The deregulation of this might actually alarm some of our allies, right? In terms of our just floodgates are open, go build AI systems, and there might be less cooperation in terms of cyber defense from allies that we've been working with for so long. And this isn't just a political thing. I get that, but it very much feels political, right? And it's more about how do we get the advantage and how do we still be the big boy in the room that, is bullying everybody else.
I
Um,
get the sense that we're not asking allies for permission to
no, we're not even
have
talking.
access to their data,
Collaboration
spy
has
on them,
gone
all
out
of
the
those things.
window. He's like, talk to
Like,
who? I don't
there's no
talk. I
asking.
just, yes, we don't collaborate. I just tell you what needs to happen. Um,
Exactly.
and I do think, look, there's an aspect of this we need to consider is what is that pace of AI need to be, right? In order to not get left behind, but at the same time account for protecting humans. We talk about protect and serve with a lot of our frontline responders.
Mhm.
How are we protecting? We're definitely serving. We're serving up the technology no matter how quickly we can build it and at any cost, essentially. Um,
That
but how are
alignment
we protecting?
question. If we can actually align humans on what our human values actually are, we might be able to align AI to our human values.
Oh, that's a completely different podcast episode for us.
I
Um,
mean,
oh my gosh. I think this is going to be an ongoing thing we're going to have to continue to pull forward. But I'm curious to see if they develop some kind of a collaborative ecosystem or some checks and balances similar to what we did with, nuclear weapons, because this could be very dangerous. I mean, AI could have access to all this stuff if it's being used on the military grade and if it's thinking on its own. War games. If anybody hasn't watched that movie, go watch it. War games. But I think there's probably more to discuss on this, and we'll likely come up with another episode to talk about the intricacies of how this is going to play
mm.
out as we go. But
Should we
let
do
us know
an
your
episode where
thoughts.
we're integrating all of the different technologies? So, let's talk about robotics, all-terrain robots that can act autonomously on the blockchain using like advanced AI. Like, okay, you want to get the
I need
scariest?
I need Rose. Or was it Rosie from the Jetsons at this point? That's what I need in my house. She's going to be there to take care of everything at home.
It's so
Um,
enticing though, right?
I
Like,
know it is. Very much
I
so. I
look,
mean,
I have my smart lights hooked up to the Alexa now, and it's so fun. It's like, hey Alexa,
turn
turn
on the
my light
light.
on 25% or whatever, right? But
I mean, there is a use case for everything, right? That
yeah.
doesn't mean we need it. It just means there's a use case for it. That's it. Um, but I think there's more serious matters besides making coffee and turning on lights, right? That we need to be worried about at this point. So, I'd love to hear everybody's thoughts about what you think of this change in terms of the safeguards that were removed. And if you have an opposing view, let us know. We want to hear it. This is not about our perspective, and that's the only perspective. If there's something new that we can learn from what you know, share it. That's really what this podcast is about. And we look forward to hearing more from all of you and more to come in future episodes. So until then, see you later.